Hello, and welcome to It's a Fandom Thing. I'm your host, Erin Marlowe, and each week I'm joined by a panel of guests to discuss all things fandom and pop culture, primarily from a female perspective. You'll find everything from fanfic, to cosplay, to Schitt's Creek, to Supernatural, and everything in between. So put on your favorite piece of fandom merch, set aside that fanfic that you're writing about your OTP, and sit back and enjoy this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to this special interview episode of It's a Fandom Thing. I'm your host, Erin Marlowe, and I am very, very excited to be speaking with two amazing people involved with fansplaining, and I'm sure a lot of our audience out there knows of fansplaining from the decade-long podcast. So now it's relaunching as an independent, subscriber-supported journalistic publication. So that is a whole new venture, and I'm just very excited to talk about that with Elizabeth Minkel and one of the editors, Lynn Kodega. So I'm very excited to have both of you on. So let me first introduce you, and you can say hello. So hello, Elizabeth.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. And then Lynn. Hello, Lynn.
Hello.
Thank you both so much for speaking with me. So first, I just want to know, can you give a brief overview, Elizabeth, of fansplaining and how it kind of turned from the podcast to what it is now?
Yeah, so fansplaining started in 2015, so more than a decade now. It's kind of wild to think about. I'm a journalist, as is Lynn, and I was on a podcast at San Diego Comic-Con with a bunch of other folks who were kind of studying fandom or talking about fandom in the mainstream, like folks from Wattpad and Tumblr. And there was a person at the other end of the long table, Flourish Clink, who I had never met before. And they were explaining fans in Hollywood. And they came up to me afterwards and was like, we should start a podcast. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then they hunted me down the next day and were like, we should start a podcast. And then stalked me across the city of San Diego, which is not that far to go, but still. And so I was like, okay, this person is persistent and they seem very businesslike. So why not? It was the middle of the 2010s. Everyone was starting a podcast. So yeah, we were really interested. We both have master's degrees in kind of interdisciplinary fields around fandom. We had both been in fandom for decades. So we were really interested in all these different groups who were talking about fandom and didn't seem great at talking to each other. And there was a lot of exploitation at the time from Hollywood because they had learned about fans, and the media too, but they weren't very good at being respectful or even accurate about what fandom was or what fans wanted. I think they were seeing some bad parts of fandom and extrapolating from that and just looking at as groups to exploit. So yeah, we started the podcast just bi-weekly. We did it for 9 years. We had dozens and dozens of guests, more than 200 episodes. We talked to academics in fan studies, which if anyone doesn't know is the interdisciplinary field that studies fans. We talked to people from Hollywood, other journalists, technologists, and lots of fans. We had a lot of really, really engaged listeners who are longtime fans or newer fans, and they would write in with their perspectives. They would respond to other fans. And so I felt like we had a really big, beautiful conversation. And then Flourish had to go and become a priest. I guess it was very important to them. And they also had to have a baby, also very important to them. And so those two things combined meant that they had to step down. So we stopped the podcast. And for a little while, I was trying to figure out if there's someone I could replace Flourish with. But in the interim, there were just so many, like when I started covering fandom in the beginning of the 2010s, just increasing numbers of bad articles about fans in the mainstream media. And I was getting very, very frustrated. And I was having trouble placing pitches, even though I've been a journalist for major publications for years. And actually, Lynn, you were a big reason why I decided to do this, because Lynn had co-founded worker-owned independent site called Rascal, which is about TTRPGs. That's true. I'm explaining it. I'm explaining you now. And Lynn was on my Comic-Con panel last summer, and I remember talking to you and seeing this is something that we could really do. There is a gap. There are all these niche publications starting that's no one's covering video games this way. No one's covering TTRPG stuff. You get a little bit of it in the mainstream, but it's okay. And usually it's not great. You're just kind of reading it like this, through your fingers, oh God, what are they going to say? So I feel like there was a space for fandom and no one was really doing... There's a few pop culture ones, don't love them, don't really seem like they're covering fandom with the depth that I wanted, and I know that Lynn wants and a lot of our readers want. So yeah, Lynn and Asia Romano, who's also a longtime fandom journalist, and I got together, and for the last few months, we've been getting this site ready and trying to explain to people that it's not a podcast anymore. It's a publication, but it's been a little bit of a confusing marketing thing, but hopefully as we launched last week and as these pieces start to come out, people will really understand what we're doing and the kind of depth and nuance and ideally thoughtfulness around fans. I hope they'll see what we're doing and want to support that, because otherwise it's just going to be the New York Times writing a bad article once every 3 months about fandom and you going like this.
Yeah, that's true. So, Lynn, what was it then about the project that appealed to you? Were you just instantly like wanting to jump aboard, or?
Yeah, more or less instantly wanting to jump aboard. Because I had done this with Rascal, and now at Rascal, I am I'm just a writer now, which is great. Like Chase Carter, one of the co-founders, has really stepped up and is like more or less the editor-in-chief. So I just show up a couple times a week and throw them an article. And I'm like, here you go. Enjoy. So yeah, it's always fun to do this kind of project building where you approach something from a very holistic lens. Like we want to do fandom by the fandom by, about, and for the fandom. For fans.
Put all those words together. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah. So there's all that sort of thing where it's nice to build something, and it's nice to create a space that you feel not only proud of, but you feel like you want to invite other people into. So creating Fansplaining and working with Elizabeth to rebuild a new version of what she and Flourish really, really like spent a long time establishing is really cool, really very fun. So yeah, not a lot of hesitation on my part.
This would be amazing if you were like, actually, it sucked, and this is where I'm giving notice. It's been a really cool couple of months. No, it's really nice to hear. Thank you.
A really cool couple of months. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah. You hang up right there. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also think there is a recognition in what Elizabeth is saying, where there is a real lack of fandom journalism in general culture writing, and fandom is culture at this point. So to ignore fandom or to have people who don't really know what they're talking about like peek into fandom and say like, well, here's this like really incredible, marvelous thesis. And we're just like, no. This is basic shit that was covered 15 years ago that like you need to move on. And I think it just stems from a lack of not only institutional knowledge, as culture desks are kind of gutted across the board, but just a real dismissive attitude from the people in charge, right? You know, it's like when Timothy Chalamet.
Timmy.
That boy.
Timmy.
Yeah, Timmy. That's what I say.
Yeah, my good friend Timmy. When he said, who cares about ballet? And everyone like got into an uproar. I'm like, okay, who cares? Like, it's the same thing with fandom, right? Like, who cares about fandom? But no one's getting into an uproar in the same way. I think it's kind of in the same vein of like, culture reporting is not doing this well, and that therefore people are really dismissive of what it is. It's just like a cycle. So anyway, yeah, fun to correct the record, I guess.
Well, I think people still think of fandom as like little preteen or teeny boppers, and like don't think of it as something that is more profound than that, or like builds community, or people that are above the age of, 15 or something. People don't even think that, people that are adults, or especially once you get above 30 and then above 40 even, it's like, nope, you can't be a fan of anything anymore.
Get on your
have to
ice
grow up.
flow and go, that's it.
Yeah. It's true. And so it's looked down upon, and it's like, it's judged a lot. So I think that's why it's not covered.
Unless you're a sports fan.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Which people don't want to admit that that's a fandom, but it's a fandom.
So it's where the word fandom comes from.
Well, in the recent article called Reintroducing Fansplaining, you do say to understand the world, you have to understand fandom. And I know you both have started to speak a little bit about that, but can you speak a little bit more to the importance of understanding fandom?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think that when I flourished and I started fansplaining, and I've been writing in the mainstream media for a few years, we have been in fandom since the 90s. I think Lynn's a little bit younger than me, but also probably a similar early 2000s around then. The good old days, bad old days, I don't know. And it was after 50 Shades of Grey, and really it kind of thrust a spotlight onto our practices. This was my secret subculture that I would tell my friends that I read and wrote Harry Potter fan fiction, but it was not something that you would be putting on your resume or something, right? It's certainly stigmatized. And 50 Shades happened, and around the same time, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe was really like blowing up. And Hollywood, I know for a fact, was like, oh, fans are the ones, right? Like, we want to create these like massive franchises, long running franchises, right? And to get that, and I think there was a miscalculation on Hollywood's part that there was some sort of infinite number of super fans, as they like to say, where they assume that every single viewer was going to become a super fan, which I think they are now learning is false. There is a ceiling on that. But I think at the time we were just kind of watching this really aggressive mainstreaming, like a process that was happening. Like 10 years later or 11 years later, that's done. Like, it's mainstreamed now, right? And I think for a lot of younger people in particular, like Gen Z, there's a fanishness that is kind of threaded through the entire way that they conceive of culture, right? And they grew up on the very social web, kind of interacting with celebrity accounts or really engaging with fan works in a much more destigmatized way. Like, I was secretly reading Buffy and Harry Potter fan fiction when I was 14, 15. Whereas a lot of them are doing it out in the open. They're not ashamed about it. They're like making TikTok edits and Instagram posts promoting their stuff, right? Meanwhile, you have adults who didn't grow up in that world coming into fandom now and doing the same thing because they just see it as, oh yeah, like I'm promoting myself. Like, they see it as something you can monetize, right? And so I think that there's just that kind of low key fanishness is like literally the bedrock of our entire cultural conversation right now. And so this kind of lack of understanding of it or just deciding that certain things are fandom. Like, for example, Lynn wrote this launch piece for us about the pit and its fandom. And as Lynn was writing it and I was editing it, every single day someone wrote a new stupid article about quote unquote the pit fandom, right?
Every day. It is not an exaggeration. Literally every single day we would post a new article in our Slack.
I was like, you cited a few of them at a certain point. I was like, we cannot link to all of these, right? Like, this is too many. It could be a giant annotated list. And every single one of them just went on Twitter and they were like, fans are saying on Twitter, the fandom is saying on Twitter. And then it was like a couple of tweets, right? And it's like, to misunderstand, I think the media misunderstanding what fandom is, obviously that's a part of fandom. Like, people live tweeting or people giving their takes on Twitter is certainly a component of fan culture, but they're missing the entire breadth and the way that all of these platforms interact with each other. And people who study fans, like in Hollywood right now, or academics know all this, right? And it's annoying for me as a journalist, and I'm sure Lynn too, to see our fellow journalists just do such a bad job over and over again, right? It's like I don't really understand why this is happening. So yeah, I think that, like, it is impossible. It's a fact that there is the fandom coverage has kind of tanked so much when fandom is more omnipresent and this kind of pervasive thing throughout our culture is weird to me. It seems like this should just be a core component of covering culture. And for some reason, the articles just get stupider. I'm just going to say it like it is right now. So
I wonder if either of you think that maybe part of that is because some journalists and media look down on fans and don't think they are deserving of as much respect or think they might cause more harm to the landscape. Because I've seen quite a few tweets about that, about how fan culture is just like poison and toxic, and which it can be. But do you think maybe that's why? Because they don't really think of it as like worthy of, I don't know, praise might not be the right word, but worthy of respect.
Yeah. You want to get that, Lynn?
Yeah.
I have some thoughts if you don't.
I think that by and large, fanish practices are mostly done, right? Fan fiction, fan edits, GIF sets, meta. A lot of that is done as a part of the gift culture of fandom. And when that is exposed, right? When that part of fandom is exposed, a lot of people just don't know what to do with it. Like, they don't know why it's happening. They don't know how it's happening. They don't know what to say about it. And then I think another reason that fans and fanish practices are kind of like denigrated is because there's just a lot of misconceptions about like what fandom is, how fandom works, what avenues it takes. I think that there's also a part of it where journalists do look down on fans because it's that kind of like generational gap where every single generation looks down on the generation under it, right? Where that like happens within culture. And so many fans, like Elizabeth said, fandom, Gen Z and new fans are kind of thrust into this ecosystem where you're fans of streamers, you're fans of celebrities, you're fans of like YouTubers, you're fans of like whatever Sabrina Carpenter's pose is at whatever concert she's doing, right? Like it's stuff like that where your engagement with your community is very reciprocal. And in order to kind of engage with that and understand that, you have to be in that reciprocal environment. And a lot of journalists aren't. So instead of taking the time to actually understand like what they're looking at or what they're reporting on, they just have this really outsider view of what fandom is. And a lot of that, when you really dig into it, is based on these incorrect assumptions and a lot of the ideas about why people are doing this. It's the underlying basis of those is misunderstood.
I totally agree. And I also think, I mean, one interesting wrinkle I think now is that sometimes it's maybe the opposite a little bit. It's not that they look down on fans. It's just that they like, we've seen a lot of new fans recently. There are like a fair number of new routes in. Like, I don't know if you know much about the Hermione scene, for example. I know you're excited for me to mention Hermione, Lynn. Just the Harry Potter, these like huge Harry Potter fanfiction hits that got sold for millions of dollars, right? And got sold as original novels. That brought in a huge range of like other people from like romance and like book talk, right, into the fandom space. Or Heated Rivalry, I think, brought in a ton of new people into fandom. And so you're getting, what I would describe now is also a lot of Columbusing, which I don't know if you know that expression, but it's like when you like march up into a subculture or a field or something and you act like you discovered it. And I mean, this also happens in academia. Like there's certain academic fields that are constantly Columbusing fandom, and all the fan studies people are like, we have literally existed for decades. We have conferences. We have a title for our fields. Like this is infuriating to like have like psychology people or whatever be like, have you noticed that these people like gather around and have these behaviors, you know? And so I've noticed a lot in the last couple of years in particular. It's not necessarily a lack of respect, but it's just a lack of curiosity, a lack of ability to do basic research. Some of it does come down to the structures of the publishing or the media industry, rather. These culture teams have been gutted. Like I said in my announcement article, just trying to explain the state of the industry. So many people have been laid off in recent years. The freelance budgets have been slashed. So knowledgeable freelancers like us even struggle to get pitches placed, right? And so then you have people who maybe are on staff but are younger and didn't really do much research, just kind of reinventing the wheel, but not researching how wheels are made. And so then you get this kind of subpar thing with bad research. And then everyone gets mad because it's a bad article about fandom. And it's just like this constant cycle that we're stuck in. I don't know. Depressing.
And we're going to fix it.
Goodbye. Yep. All by ourselves.
We're going to do it.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, and I think going to the younger fans coming in and like rediscovering fandom or discovering it, and with Heated Rivalry, I think that is such a good example of that because Queer as Folk is my all-time favorite show, the US version. And all of the conversations around Heated Rivalry and where the places for cisgendered straight women in that fandom, and if they are, you know, keeping out queer people or anything like that, feeling like, and gay men feeling like they can't enjoy it in the same way That was the exact conversation around Queer as Folk. It was exactly like carbon copy, except for, as I say, if people were to watch Queer as Folk, they would probably blush at the fact that it's nowhere near. I mean, Heated Rivalry to me, I watched it and I'm like, this is so tame compared to what Queer as Folk.
Wow. I never saw Queer as Folk. You're telling me it's more?
Oh my gosh. It's like, it's way, I mean, that was like a revolutionary show because you didn't have that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Heated Rivalry is very tame in comparison. And not to put that down, it's just interesting to me with the conversation being exactly the same, like almost word for word. But I think the biggest difference was social media was around during Queer as Folk, but not to the same level as it is now. So I think that has had the biggest impact on the way people are viewing fandom. I don't know if either of you agree with that.
I absolutely. And I think, I mean, back to what Lynn said earlier about the lack of the like degradation of institutional knowledge. I think that's a great example. The Hermione stuff too with 50 Shades of Grey, the echoes were so strong. Like 50 Shades of Grey was all these people writing these dark het romances and then, selling them for money. And there was a lot of drama within the fandom about whether that was like kosher or not, et cetera. And what is this going to do to fan fiction and all this? And then we're having the same exact conversations, 12 years later. And I'm one of the only journalists I've read who actually was referencing the 50 Shades people and everything that went down there. Like there was lots of coverage of the Hermione stuff, and no one ever wanted to seem to bring that up. We have such a short cultural memory, right? And Heated Rivalry for sure. Like I've been in slash fandom, which is male romance fan fiction, since the 90s, and we've been having this. Who's writing it? Who's allowed to read it? Who's allowed to write about these men? Like, what's the deal? Like every single piece that I read, Lynn is gonna edit me. I'm gonna write a piece. Every single one of these Heated Rivalry slash pieces was very ciscentric, I felt. Often straight-centric, but especially ciscentric. Like it's lots and lots of people who are transmasc or non-binary or whatever within these worlds. And this coverage never even touched any of that, right? And so we're gonna have a piece on that. Because it's like, can't do these 101 things over and over again. Like every single publication is just doing 101s over and over again. And I think so many fans I know from the podcast, so many fans, they think deeply about stuff, right? They want the depth. Fans love to talk about themselves, to analyze their stuff, right? Like we should be able to bring that depth on the media side. It shouldn't just be like these 101 kind of glancing, gawking sort of things. And then, we're gone. And then people get mad about it.
I agree completely. Yeah. And so then, Lynn, speaking of that, since the editing was brought up, can you talk a little bit about the editing process, like the joys and challenges of it?
Yeah. So I think that all of us at Fansplaining, Elizabeth, Asia, and we all really like editing. I think it's something that we really enjoy, where we get to dive into a piece and we get to identify the places that it's strong, identify the places where it raises more questions, and identify the places where it gives really competent answers to these difficult questions. So editing for us is reading a pitch, editing the pitch together as a group, getting the draft, editing the draft, which is, again, like I said, identifying the first go through of the draft is very much us looking at the draft and being like, okay, where are there unanswered questions? Where are there spaces that you sort of allied the meat of what you're trying to do? And again, that first round of editing is mostly just asking questions and sending it back to the author and getting those answers. And then we dive in a little bit more. So our editing process is very thorough. And because Elizabeth and Asia, both of them very specifically, have such a long history of writing and editing and fandom, we have a really strong, deep well of knowledge to draw from. And all of us have, read a lot about this topic. Like I have at least 2 to 3 books about fandom, like within arm's reach of me. Like I just picked up the fan fiction studies reader, right? Because I was like, wait, there was something about slash. And
is that the Francesca Coppa one?
It is.
Oh, Francesca Coppa, great fan studies scholar.
Yes. But yeah, so because we have this knowledge and because we are dedicated to portraying fandom in a way that moves past, like Elizabeth has mentioned, the 101, editing is really a joy because it's always fun to go in and find the things that are asking new questions of fans and fandom as we work.
I think that also all three of us are writers too. You and I, Lynn, will probably be doing more writing than Asia in the short term. But I think having been on both sides of it too, not to be like the publishing industry, the media industry is doomed and terrible and like in a death rattle or whatever. But like so many publications don't even edit anymore, right? Like there's a
Yes,
a
that's
journal
crazy.
a journalist that I've published a few times who's a wonderful writer. And both times we needed to do some kind of, I kind of was like, oh, I feel like there's a big logical gap here. Like, I need you to kind of dig in more. Like, and she wrote both times. She was like, I really love being edited by you. Like, no one else really, people don't take it that seriously. They're just like, yeah, fine. All right. Like spell check, off it goes. Right. Whereas like when you're edited well, it's a little annoying because you're like, oh God, you're giving me homework. I don't know how to solve this. There's a reason I just sent it like this. Right. But it's very validating when you actually, it's a conversation between the editor and the writer. And I think that we know both sides of that. And one thing that a lot of these new indie publications, one thing that I think a lot of them have struggled with is a lot of time it's like 4 or 5 writers start a publication. So no one wants to do the business side, which I think is also true of our group. And unfortunately, that's me.
Hilarious.
As the owner of this LLC. But no one wants to edit either, right? And so it's just kind of people tossing stuff out there. And that's tricky because then I think you get a lot of first drafts out in the world. You got a lot of raw thoughts kind of unshaped. This is an issue too with everyone going solo with their own newsletters, right? And it's like,
oh God,
you need a second guy in there to be like, okay, hold on. Like, this is not in the right order. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, you lost me here. But instead we're reading people's like just spewing out their first thoughts. And it's just like, yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah. I mean, sort of like as an example, I worked with a writer who is writing about how fan fiction is read and observed in African countries, specifically in Kenya, where this writer is from. And while we got into it, I just asked so many questions because it's such an underexplored topic that eventually the draft is like really, it's like 6,000 words.
It's quite long.
Now.
It's very long.
A lot of that comes from like my own ignorance, right? Where I'm just like, okay, you mention Kenyan curriculum, like the specific like state sponsored curriculum here. I need you to explain what that is and why it's important to fan fiction and why that's important to fandom. So there were just so many questions where I was like, okay, this is great. And I really like where we ended up, but it is 6,000 words. So we'll see what happens. but it was great. It was, and like the woman's name is Soila Kenya, who's writing about this. And she really, like at the end of it, we asked a lot of her. We really did. But at the end of it, she was like, this was so great. I really love this piece. Thank you for pushing me. And we're just like, thank you so much.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great to hear.
Yeah. So like, again, we put this woman through the ringer and I did feel kind of bad about it. It got like 3 rounds of edits. But the final piece is really fascinating and gives you such a comprehensive view of this part of fandom that's not explored. And I think that's like, even if it is challenging to have to read through a piece and be like, I still have 1,000 questions, at the end of it, the final product does speak for itself in very interesting and very like satisfying ways. Giving authors and writers homework is very fun. Like there was another writer who was writing about detectives and their like second in commands, like the Sherlock and the Holmes archetype. And as soon as they sent me a draft, Charlie Jane Anders wrote about Sherlock and Holmes. And I was like, okay, not to add to your plate. But I'd sent them like a dozen articles. I sent them like, not to add to your plate, but Charlie Jane Anders just wrote something incredible that I sent it to him. So it was just like this unending series of like, I am so sorry. You need to talk about Columbo. And then here's another article for you. So yeah, it's a lot of fun finding the places where those questions arise and pushing people. So it's a challenge, obviously, to like know where those questions are and know where those dips in the meat of the story happen. And then it's fun to just be like, okay, you need to talk about Columbo. and doing that kind of iteration with writers.
It's a tricky balance. There's two frames of mind about editing too, which is like, oh, it's better if you're an expert editing, because then you could be like, sometimes with these fandom articles, I'm like, if anyone who knew anything about this topic had edited them, they could have been like, that's a false framing that you just made, right? And like a fact check kind of. But I used to edit a science and tech publication that was like sponsored by the Gates Foundation. And so it had a lot of like global public health reporting. And I am not a scientist and I am not a doctor and I'm not based in sub-Saharan Africa, And so I would be in case you didn't know any of these things. And so, I'd be working with science. I was working with one person who's in the field working on tuberculosis. And it was like, I am going to be like, I can be a smart reader and I am dumb on this topic, right? And I think that there's an interesting balance sometimes you have to get where it's like, you can know very little bit about it if you ask smart questions to try to get it to be clear. Or I've edited a lot of software engineers too, and I'm not a software engineer. And so it's like, okay, how can I get it so I can understand it without dumbing it down? How can I get them to express their expertise in a way? And I think that that's something that you want to bring to any subject. And I think fandom deserves that too. And so hopefully between the three of us, we have a good balance with our knowledgeable writers and our breadth of knowledge, but also we know that, we're going to cover stuff. We're already covering stuff I don't know anything about, and I don't want to just overlay my personal fandom experiences onto that because, I don't know what it'd be like to be a Kenyan fan fiction reader or what's some other pieces we have coming up, a fan of Drake. I don't know what that would be like. I don't think he's actually writing about being a fan of Drake. I think he's writing about Drake's fandom, to be clear. I don't know what it'd be like. I'm sorry.
I live in LA. I can't even say that man's name.
Well, we're publishing an article about Drake fandom, so get ready to read all about him. It's coming up soon. You're getting a really fun preview of everything we have coming up.
Well, and there is that to say of like where there are those challenges of, the death of the author and all of that kind of stuff. And I mean, it's big time, of course, in the Harry Potter fandom is where you see it a lot, is how can you consume this ethically and be a fan still? And does it negate being a fan of it? I think that's a huge, huge thing.
Yeah.
Not consume it ethically.
We are actually doing a piece about this that I'm writing and Lynn's going to edit. And it's about that. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is obviously a conversation that runs throughout all of fandom. Like, the man who made the movies that I've written fan fiction about for almost a decade now is like avoiding extradition for, underage sex trafficking. So that's Bryan Singer of the X-Men films, by the way, in case that was unclear. And so it's like, am I thrilled about the person who is responsible for these films that I write erotic fan fiction about? No. The Harry Potter one, I think, is we don't have to go into the details, but I think it's a much more challenging one because I think she's actively causing harm. So we're going to be covering that. And we do have a policy with Harry Potter in particular where we will cover the fandom and we will cover, the things J.K. Rowling is doing now, but we won't be like reviewing the new Harry Potter show or something. We have a very purely critical, but it's still, obviously, it is the most productive fan fiction fandom, as Lynn checked the other day.
It's up there.
Yeah. So people are still chugging away and they're still massive. And so obviously it's like a major part of fan culture right now. We have to talk about it. So, but yeah, I think those questions, animate. They ran through all of Fansplaining the podcast. We all constantly had people writing in, talking about their ethical dilemmas or like, this idea of are my actions helping this person, right? It's tricky because there are different ways that fan behaviors actually do help, right? Sometimes I think that fans have an outsized impression of their own importance to, say, Hollywood, right? Where they'll be like, we gave it free marketing. And it's like, I gotta say, I don't think that a few thousand people on Tumblr were putting those $1 billion for the Marvel movie or whatever. Like, obviously, stuff can have a larger life because of like the free advertising of fans. But I think that often it is overstated when you like really crunch the numbers. So fans trying to figure out if they're culpable with any of this stuff.
But yeah, there is that because I agree. I think, and I'm not a Harry Potter person. I was never in that fandom. I have a lot of friends that were or are.
I was.
But I think like with the new show coming out, like if you consume that is money going directly to her. And so I think that is where you kind of should draw the line. If you are like funding that person who is using their money to, help with basically the putting people's lives in danger.
Yeah.
I mean, then that's where I think you have to go, okay, well, I may be a fan of this, but I can't ethically consume a new thing that's going to give them money. So
we push our line is we are in agreement, Lynn and I, on this. That the line we have a different line, which is drop it. Like let this all go, even if it's like I think that the fan fiction fandom likes to say, oh, we're not making money off of this. We're not giving any money directly, so we're free, and it's like
reclaiming it.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Okay.
So. But I think she's a special case. Why I bring up like the fact that this was like a common thread is I think that these are all contextual, right? Like the Neil Gaiman stuff is contextual. Like I said, Bryan Singer, the head of a large Hollywood franchise, or anyone involved in any of like Miramax's Weinstein property, right? Anyone in those fandoms, I think it's complicated, right? Now I'm thinking of just problematic people. I'm like, what if you're a Polanski fan? Like, which we don't need to go down this road.
No, it's. I mean, it's sad that there are so many that you can think of.
So many. It is, but it's obviously very indicative of these like industries, right? That the fact that there are so many. But that's another topic entirely.
Yeah, and we've covered that a lot. We did a special episode all on Neil Gaiman too. So it's a very personal topic too, I think, for a lot of people. And I understand, I mean, if you had something that like literally saved your life, because I know that's true for a lot of people, it can be very hard to find that line. But I do think there is a point when you have to go, no, my love of this is not as important as people's lives. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, switching gears a little bit here. So Lynn, you have an article coming out about The Pit. I'm still someone that needs to watch this show. I know. We have a lot of people that are panelists and listeners that love The Pit. So can you give a little bit of a preview of that article?
Sure. Yeah. It is about why and how The Pit has developed a massive fan fiction community. And it kind of goes into the things that The Pit does as on its like most basic like format structure level that really encourage fan fiction in interesting ways. And it also talks about how a lot of the journalists that are talking about the Pit fandom are doing so in a way that is very surface level, that is very uninteresting, and is just real. They're doing it surface level, they're doing it uninteresting, and they're doing it very assumptively, where they can sort of say like, oh, well, I went to Twitter and I went to Reddit and now I know what the fandom is and I know what they're saying and I know what the fans are doing, and I'm looking at them and I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. So yeah, I think the biggest thing that this article is about is how the fan fiction community around The Pit is huge and massive, and how that happened and why that's continuing to happen. And to sort of like be really, really clear about like how big this community is. Right now, the biggest producer of fan fiction on AO3 in the television, like, focus, right, is Heated Rivalry. And number 2 is The Pit. And number 3 is like half of what The Pit is. So number 1 may be Heated Rivalry, but number 2 is The Pit. That's wild. But it's really an unprecedented movement for a prestige show, for a show of this kind of, a show that's like winning Emmys, right? It typically doesn't happen very often, if it happens at all. So yeah, that's what it's about. And the Pit fandom's huge. It's so big. I have such a hard time like explaining this to non-fandom people. It is so big. 1,000 new fics are posted every week. Wild.
Wow. Even as someone who like knows about how popular it is, that still is wild to me, because of the fact that, this is a show, and granted, like I said, I haven't seen it, but it's a show that you would not, I think, on the surface, think would be as high up there as heated rivalry. I mean, that's incredible. That's really amazing. And actually, earlier when I was saying like that you see like people disrespecting fans or putting down fandom and saying it's causing issues, this is where I saw it most. It was people responding to tweets about people being angry about certain characters being written off or certain actors being let go. I saw some journalists, I saw one tweet saying there will be probably a documentary someday talking about how the fandom overreacted or something along those lines to the fact that this person was let go.
Yeah, I fundamentally disagree with that. I think the fandom overreacts. People like posting their opinions on Twitter, which happens, every day, or people posting their opinions on Blue Sky or on Reddit. And I'm like, that's fine. People that's called watching television. I don't think anything out of the ordinary. I think it's just the fact that journalists are seeing this happen at such a scale because the social media fandom is a part of the fanfiction fandom, is a part of the Tumblr fandom, meta fandom, art fandom. Like it all, kind of glosses in and out of each other. And because the Pit fandom is so big, and because people are like active in that fanish activity of like just posting takes, there's gonna be a lot of takes on Twitter that are just like fans doing their thing. It's so normal. And it's wild to me that everyone is like pearl clutching and trying to pull out a microscope and figure out like what's going on in this fandom. And I'm like, it's called watching television. Try it.
Well, even the definition of those people as fans or the fandom is very spurious to me, right? Like,
oh yeah.
One thing that I've been banging the drum about with this Pit stuff and all the bad articles is they're almost exclusively about Twitter. And if you're still using Twitter in 2026 to do fandom, you're a very specific type of person, right? Like in my fandom, which is like X-Men movies, there's a big Twitter fandom, and it's a very different climate than the people who are creating fan fiction and on Tumblr, right? Like they are posting memes, hot takes, and it is algorithmic. And it is like the things that you post, you want to move. Or Lynn probably saw less of this because you were actively being hired by Interview with the Vampire. But I studied the Interview with the Vampire fandom on Twitter when the last season was airing 2 years ago. And it was people posting things for engagement because the Twitter is such a fast-paced, purely algorithmic platform. And so, and also the people who choose to be on it now in 2026, I think it's a specific subset of people who don't care about who owns it or who the waters they're swimming in when they're like surrounded by neo-Nazis, right? And it's just like, I got to get my takes to go as far as possible on Twitter, right? Like there's lots and lots of places that do fandom right now. And if you're choosing to do it on Twitter, it's because you like the big engagement numbers, half of which are probably not even real accounts, right?
Yeah, it's very much you are okay being in the Nazi bar.
Right. So like when I wrote an article for Wired when Interview with the Vampire season 2 was airing because the Twitter fandom was declaring war on the AMC marketing department. And they were posting things like, we have to find their addresses, right? Like it was wild. And so I was like, okay, like this is now newsworthy in the sense of like, this is a really good illustration of how a lot of fans don't understand how marketing works anymore. They don't know the levers to get a show renewed. Unfortunately, this is a thing that I'm a fan of and I'm witnessing this, right? The article was specifically about Twitter fandom. And I made that very, very clear that it was like not the fandom feels this way. It was that this one group of fans is making a lot of noise doing this. And here's what it says about other dynamics, right? And I think the problem with a lot of these recent articles about heated rivalry and the Pit is they take Twitter to be the totality of fandom when it's a tiny, tiny fraction of, like if I would respect it more if it was literally just what TikTok is saying, because that's like a much larger pool of people, right?
Huge. Yeah. And the kind of work that they're doing on TikTok is in general more engaged, more focused, like longer. It takes more effort than whatever they're spouting off on Twitter.
Yeah, spitting out a hot take, right? This is something that I think anyone who's in fandom, if you spend time on different platforms, you can see what gets created, right? And so I'm a very big Tumblr user. And when I compare between platforms, like obviously it's the hottest, quickest takes on Twitter. And it always has been just because of the nature of the platform. But it's gotten a lot worse as the algorithmic side got so ramped up and that became the default way for people to use it. Whereas you might get a similar seed of an idea on Tumblr, but it's expanded and thoughtful and 10 paragraphs long, right? And so it's just like the platforms define a lot of this. And I think to really understand fan dynamics, you have to understand those platforms. Everyone who studies fans in Hollywood knows that. You can't just like do a blanket look across all of them and assume the way people are engaging on one is same as the other, or that one is a totality. It speaks for all of them, basically.
Well, it's interesting when you mentioned TikTok, because I'm in a few Reddit subs, like The Bear is one of my favorite shows. And when you look at the Bear Reddit fandom, it's really interesting because a lot of them hate shippers. Like it's like this huge thing of like, but it's mainly if you ship Sid and Carmi. So if you ship those two, you're kind of like looked down upon, and you're talked about, like people talk about you like, oh, you're too much, you're on TikTok too much. That's because of TikTok. So because of TikTok, you're a shipper. If you weren't on TikTok, you would not be shipping these two.
It's a little gendered, I would say.
It's that, and there's also some race. There's also some racism underneath.
Yeah, that
is
too. Also that one had like big racist. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I remember when all that was blowing up over the last season.
It's wild to me. They should kiss. I don't get it.
Well, this is like where shipping comes from, right? Is like X-Files. It was a binary. It was the people who wanted the two of them together and people who did not, right? Like that's the shippers were the people who liked the romance. Like, again, like we've been doing this. I remember when that was blowing up in the Bear fandom, I read a bunch of articles that acted like this was the first time it ever happened. And the racial element, there are so many famous examples of people don't want the black female lead to like the new Star Trek movies or Sleepy Hollow, or like there's all these
yeah.
Or
and
even the black male lead if you look at Star Wars with Rey and Finn.
Exactly, right, for sure. And so like there are so many times, and so many articles have been written about all this stuff, right? And then you still have people being like, I had a thought. Have you noticed that? And it's like, yes, so have thousands of other people. Fans have written long, long metas about this stuff, and just like, I don't know,
Yeah, it's really interesting in that fandom because there's also like some of the fans that are fans of the ship, because I shipped them. I didn't at first, and then I did hop aboard that ship reluctantly because I really don't think it's ever going to happen.
It's okay. It doesn't need to be canon to ship it.
Exactly. There's some good fanfic in the Bear fandom too.
Yeah, I've heard.
But I noticed that there was also some internalized misogyny happening towards the character of Claire. So then you'd have like all of these, and I don't even like that character that much, but I found myself defending her because of some of the other fans. And it's just an interesting dynamic in that fandom because you have so many people that hate any kind of shipping, except a lot of those same people would be like, well, no, but we want these two together. I'm like, well, then why do you care about the other two being together? It's such a weird dynamic of also being like attacking TikTok in the way it was reminiscent in a way of what you were saying about Twitter, where they're like, well, that just means that you're in this weird algorithm thing and you shouldn't be on TikTok. And that's affecting the way you're viewing a show.
Sure. Right. And yeah, I definitely see that leveled against. I mean, it is certainly true of TikTok as well. I'm saying like, oh, maybe TikTok is better than Twitter, but it's like the algorithmic platforms, all of them that validate spicier takes or like, right. There are things that go far on these places whereas, Fanworks fandom, fanfiction fandom is like very different in comparison. It's like completely non-algorithmic, right? And so that's why it's an interesting thing to look at, but it's also still a subset, right? Like I would never go and say all fans are saying this because, reading Lynn's like assessment of the Pit Twitter fan or the Pit AO3 fandom, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm interested in what fanfiction fans are interested in because I'm a fanfiction person, but I would never say I would never go back to the producers of the Pit and be like, this is what fans are into,
I mean, I think the only real 100% accurate, like, or not accurate, but like the one conclusion that I've drawn from the Pit fanfiction fandom is that the fans are deeply invested in something that the show will never give them, and they are okay with that. They are the fans who are writing fanfiction are deeply invested in who these characters are outside of the pit. And the show is only invested in what they're doing inside of the pit, kind of by the nature of its format. And I propose in this essay that difference in priority is one of, if not the main reason that the fanfic community is so huge. It's because it's just they're interested in one thing, the show is interested in something else, and they can coexist completely peacefully, right? Like when season 2 came out and there had been this sort of like explosion of fanfic after season 1. Most of the fanon that had been developed wasn't contradicted by season 2 because the fanon was so fundamentally focused on something completely different than what season 2 was focused on. Anyway.
Which, I mean, that's an age-old, we tried to figure out some ways to kind of back this up with, which was very funny. Lynn was like, do you have any evidence of this thing you wrote in the notes? And I was like, I'll try to find something. Yesterday, I realized we did an entire podcast episode about like the relationship between the quality of the source material and the amount of fan fiction. We did an entire episode about it in 2022. I just completely blocked. You're a podcaster, like sometimes it's just like, so many, and you're like, oh God,
Yep.
past me said some things I agree with now. That's fine. But like I think also too, there's so, just to bring it even to thinking about the way people perceive of fans, like when you're in fan fiction, I think what you're describing is you can extrapolate it to all sorts of fandoms in the sense of it's not like, oh, fans only like to write fan fiction about bad shows and it's weird that The Pit is a good show. It's that they want to use fan fiction to get something that the show's not going to give them. And so like you saying that makes me think about like, I was in Torchwood fandom back in the day. I don't know if you ever watched the Doctor Who spinoff Torchwood, the adult Doctor Who spinoff Torchwood.
No,
Lynn.
Because I'm not a nerd.
You were, I'm sorry, when that show was on the air, I think you might have been in elementary school, so I understand why that one missed you, but anyway.
Okay, you hack? Like, well, fuck you.
So back when Lynn was a child, I was in the Torchwood fandom, which, if you never saw it, the protagonist is pansexual. I believe he calls himself omnisexual because he's from the future. And there's he has a relationship on screen with one of the male employees, right? But it's like very sexual and obviously sexual, but like on screen, they don't have a lot of romantic intimacy, right? We are robbed of that. So the fan fiction was about building that up and showing how they could have like a deep emotional connection and not just the sexual shenanigans you see on screen, right? So that's what we were lacking. Then I was in Sherlock fandom and they have a lot of emotional intimacy. And there's no spoiler, they don't have sex on screen. And so all the fan fiction was about closing that. In the secret episode of maybe you know about the famous conspiracy theory. So all the fan fiction was about closing that physical gap, right? And also like having them make their emotional feelings explicit rather than like really. And so I think that so much of what fans, especially transformative fans, people who make fan works, want is to kind of fill in the gaps, shade the gaps, change something. And I think that is very confusing to people who are not in fandom, and what they see as fans demanding that their like headcanons match the canon in the show, right? Which obviously is a different mode of I'm not saying that those people aren't fans, like people demanding that Star Wars movie be different or whatever, right? Like I get it. But I think that like if that's the only thing you see is like masses of people demanding a certain way, which is what all these Pit articles were saying was happening, then I think that if that's your only perception of fandom, then you don't understand fan culture, which is transformative and creative and celebratory. And that's not to say that, all fan fiction is great and all fan fiction fans are great and the people who are like release the Snyder cut are bad or something. It's like it's all one big like broader pool together. These kinds of modes influence each other. It's not like, you could be writing fan fiction over here and be on Twitter tweeting release the whatever cut. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. These aren't like exclusive modes, basically. So I think you have to understand all of that is you have to understand fandom.
I wouldn't have a podcast without Supernatural and that fandom with Destiel and everything like that. And the queer baiting that did legitimately happen on that show and all of that.
Many such cases.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I totally understand that, because that fandom can be extremely toxic.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
but also the supernatural fandom is fascinating to me, and so many creative projects come out of it analyzing fandom, and it's interesting because it's like I know multiple fandom podcasts where the people came out of Supernatural because the Supernatural fandom contains multitudes still, right? Like I know people. It was very funny when all three of those guys had like different projects out. It was very funny to watch which of the Supernatural people I knew went in which of the three directions. Like people on my feed posting about Walker, Texas Ranger, and not the same people who are posting about like when Misha was on that Gotham Nights show or whatever. Night. It's like, who's your guy? Which direction are you going? I don't know which direction
who's
you
your
were.
Guy?
Jensen Ackles.
I saved him for last.
Dean is my favorite character of all time ever. Dean Winchester is my favorite. I have another podcast called It's a Dean Thing where we just analyze Dean Winchester.
I love it. That's beautiful.
So
beautiful.
So yeah, it is a monolith. There's totally different, and there's of course the shipping wars in that fandom are a lot.
Yeah. Legendary.
Yes.
Legendary.
And I mean, right now with The Boys, the new season of The Boys, and they
all showed up for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. And the whole fandom was like, and I felt bad for The Boys fandom because you have another fandom totally invading yours and claiming it as theirs. And so, yeah.
I think what's really interesting about that fandom is how much the actors, those three, really understand fandom. I think that they understand fandom in a way that like not a lot of other actors understand fandom.
Sure.
I think and it's really interesting to see them talk about it and like go to these very specific like supernatural conventions year after year after year. I think that they have a really interesting relationship with fandom and fans in ways that are like really unique.
Yeah, I mean, there's the only analogy I can think of is the original Star Trek people, and that was like a wildly different time in history, right? It's like imagine if you had that level of repeated fandom access as an actor, but also you had Twitter, And
imagine else.
It. Imagine you're Misha Collins. Imagine it.
I don't want to.
So then what I last want to ask both of you is, and as much as you feel comfortable sharing, what have you both learned about yourselves as writers or people through covering fandom? Elizabeth?
Oh, goodness. Well, I wrote about it a little bit in my introduction, actually, and I had to do a bit of like reflection and soul searching also when Flourish left the podcast. But like when I started covering fandom, it was in like 2011, 2012, and it's 50 Shades time. And first of all, very beginning, I was like, they were like 50 Shades of Grey is fan fiction, so steamy. It's so like, erotic. And I was like, no, it's actually quite serious literature, which is like, get over that, right? So like, that's something I need to learn like quickly. It's like, yes, it is serious literature. I think that like erotica is serious literature. I think it all is interesting in the sense of the fact that it is fan fiction is interesting in and of itself. And you don't have to like, say it's like some other kind of thing to validate it. So that was the first thing I learned. But, I started covering fandom, but it wasn't until we started Fansplaining, I learned so much about fandom. I think that what I knew when I went in was dramatically, like it's night and day, like from having all those interviews. And like in particular, like we had all these interviews, but not just the interviews. I would say, look, obviously, when you talk to people in Hollywood who like study fans or interface with fans or have personal experiences, that is really revelatory. Like even Flourish's professional, not just even, especially Flourish's professional experience. Like we did an episode very early on called "The Powers That Be," which is a term that fans use to talk about the people making the show, and it's shadowy and like who knows. And I kind of played the fan. And I was like, the powers that be, there's a reason why they can't be gay on this like supernatural-esque show that we made up in our heads, right? And Flourish was like, no, you don't understand how it actually works, right? And like, so learning about that, sure. But I would say especially on over 9 years of fansplaining, it was all of the letters we got from other fans. Because it was just people with different opinions and different experiences who were really thoughtful, And I think that's something that you cannot achieve if you're just a fan like going around. I think you have to do a project like that or a project like yours where you're talking to people explicitly. It's not just something you can get by osmosis. You really need to be having these conversations. Something I hope we can do with writing too, where it's not just podcast based, right? Where we can get these different perspectives in, and that just deepens my perspectives and broadens my perspectives. So yeah, it's doing fansplaining for sure. That's the thing.
Yeah. And Lynn?
Ooh, I mean, it's tough because I haven't been a fandom journalist specifically for, like, I've never been a fandom journalist specifically.
You did some fandom stuff at IO9 for sure.
Yeah. I wrote about fandom and I was a fan, so I knew how to talk about fanish projects. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a tough one. I don't know if I could say that fandom like has taught me anything specifically, simply because it's hard to dissect fandom from the rest of my writing experiences, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked on Interview with a Vampire as the writer's assistant for season 3, and being a part of the powers that be for a show like that has such a huge fandom was an experience. It's just one of those things where I think, it was really interesting to see what people were saying and to tell myself, this is fandom. I can't engage. Like I've like been able to like block Interview with a Vampire from a lot of like my own social media just for my own mental health, because that fandom is very vocal and long-standing fandom. you know,
get ready, coming back.
It's-
We're weeks away from season
I know. I'm a
3.
fan, so I'm like, I'm in that fandom.
It's great.
It's going to be so hard. I'm going to be collecting all these bananas posts, and I'm going to be like, can I show you? Can I show you? Can I show you? And what are you going to say?
You can show me. You could show me because I trust you. It is one of those things where when I'm scrolling and just like on my civilian accounts, like I have to really, that fourth wall exists for me too.
I'm ready.
Like it goes both ways. Like we can't do this.
No, you know what I did last season, right? Well, last time? Okay, Flourish, my longtime podcast partner, was 9.5 months pregnant. They were like, it was also 100 degrees here in New York. So they were like,
medically possible?
Yeah, you overdue. They were like, or maybe they were like 9 months pregnant, but they were trapped in a pregnancy limbo for more than a month, right? And it was 100 degrees. So they were like in the dark, in the air conditioning, just huddling, just tragically sad. An Interview with a Vampire was airing. And I was like, Flourish, I'll send you the best posts. So I took so much psychic damage. I am such a good friend reading Twitter and Tumblr. And so then at one point I get this message in the middle of the night, like halfway through the season. And Flourish was like, okay, I gave in. The posts you sent were so good. I re-downloaded Tumblr. And then like 2 hours later, I got another one being like, I deleted it again. Never mind. And I was like, look at the work I'm doing for you. I'm doing it. That's why I'm the godmother of the child. That was why, and no other reason. Yeah.
I think that was probably the biggest thing that I learned, and the biggest thing that was like the biggest learning experience for me was seeing fandom from the other side of that wall and just being like, oh yeah, that wall exists for a reason. Let's put that back up brick by brick.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that myself. And then of course in the first one of the first trailers where we see Lestat go into the bookstore and one of the young women is like, I went right to go see my beta boy. And I'm just like, that's not what the Omegaverse means, Roland. We went over this. It was just...
Is that what he was trying to say?
I don't know, man. Who knows?
Maybe it's French Canadian slang we don't know about.
I don't know. But like, that's obviously like a reference to what fandom was doing. It was something that like, so Sam Slade, the production assistant and writer's assistant for season 2 and season 3, found that was the person who like identified that painting as like looking like Armand. So every time something with that painting came across my feed, I would always send it to her. So we the whole room was like really, really well aware of a lot of the fandom stuff happening, but we definitely engaged with it on our terms in like very, very specific ways. So yeah, Rollin for sure like got shown TikToks freaked out.
That's great. Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of like what Elizabeth did for Flourish, we did for Rollin.
When he was 9 months pregnant and just trapped in his apartment. And so.
I'm pretty sure that's how he felt while writing season 3. It's like
going insane.
I bet.
Going insane.
With me watching that latest trailer about 20 times by now. Anyway,
I'm so ready.
Me too.
I'm not ready
Me
and I'm
too.
ready. Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
I don't know if I'll see the episodes before anyone else does. I'm pretty sure I'm only going to see them when I see them. But yeah, it is also very interesting to be a fan of something that I worked on.
Yeah.
Weird.
When is this episode going to come out?
The first one's June 7th.
No, not the interview with the vampire.
You mean this one?
Yes. You're so ready to go.
I'll actually probably release it later this week.
Okay, well, we can just say it now. We haven't announced it yet, but let's just say it. So Gavia Baker-Whitelaw, who is our first staff writer, so incredible longtime fandom journalist and cultural critic, is going to be recapping The Vampire Lestat for us. So, and like her recaps are legendary. So I'm very excited about that.
So good.
So if you are an Interview with Vampire fan, you should probably subscribe to Fansplaining.
Yes, so that will lead me into thanking both of you for being on. And then Elizabeth, tell everybody where they can find Fansplaining. I'll be putting in the show notes.
Thank you.
Where, but go ahead.
We are fansplaining.com. We are also active on Tumblr, Blue Sky, Instagram. We have a YouTube channel, but we only put our what do you call it? Comic-Con panels there. That's not something we actively use. So the best places to find us are Tumblr, Blue Sky, and Instagram. Yeah, and Fansplaining, you become a member for free. You'll be able to read a few articles, and then our subscriptions start at $7 a month, $70 a year. You get access to all our articles. I think it's a pretty good deal for a year of fandom journalism, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, we would love it.
One long read a week.
Right. Plus interview with the vampire. If we get more subscribers, we are hoping to do 2 a week. We have more criticism coming in, like book writing and stuff like that. So it's not just covering fandom. It's also cultural criticism kind of from a fanish perspective. Because I think that fans are better cultural critics than others.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I agree. And thank you so much, Elizabeth and Lynn. Thank you again for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
I really, really enjoyed this conversation. So
likewise. Really appreciate it.
Thank you again to Elizabeth and Lynn for joining me to discuss the relaunch of Fansplaining. Please make sure to check the link in the show notes and head on over to fansplaining.com. If you would like to be a potential guest on the show, please head on over to our website. It's afandomthingpod.com. Once you're on our website, go ahead and click Contact Us. That'll shoot me an email, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so, so much for listening, and please take care of yourselves.
With Vrbo's last-minute deals, you can save over $50 on your spring getaway. So whether it's a mountain escape, city break, or a week at the beach, there's still time to get great discounts. Book your next stay now.
Average savings $72. Select homes only.